Good evening, everyone. We are so excited about tonight's conversation. Welcome to the Black Intellectualism Movement, where we have conversations that empower, uplift, and bring to the forefront the knowledge, expertise, and support of the Black community by highlighting Black professionals and their wealth of knowledge. I'm so excited today to have Ms. Nikki Patterson with us to have an awesome conversation about two topics that I think are extremely important to us right now because of where we are politically, health wise, and culturally. And it's also important to us because education is one of the greatest it was and still is one of the greatest ways to help move every community forward. And for the Black community, we definitely know that issues with education have been prevalent in our community for a long time, not because we did anything wrong, but because for many years, resource education was not available to us. We weren't allowed to read; it wasn't permitted. And then when we were finally permitted to get an education, we were placed in some of the worst conditions and had to fund our own school and had to find secondary resources. And so it was a fight to finally get our equal and fair rights in Brown versus the Board of Education. And then once we moved to integration, we've struggled with Black children not receiving the same fair and equal treatment as everyone else, and disparities across the educational system. So, education in the Black community has been a meaningful and important topic for as long as we've been in this country, and the importance of it never ends. So, I'm very excited to have this conversation today, and we're going to get right to it because let me tell you something. Nikki and I had a conversation day before yesterday, honey, and we put an hour and a half in before y'all, okay? And that was our first live conversation together. And honey, we put in an hour and a half together before you guys. So I know we're ready. And I think the thing I've also enjoyed is that she is a regular audience member for the Black Intellectualism Movement, always giving commentary, always engaging in the comments, always supporting the movement. And she has an amazing platform that I think will be very important for us to learn about, especially if you're a parent that is considering homeschooling, or if you have been aware of the recent issues Louisiana is dealing with in regards to our teaching of history as it relates to the Black community. So let me go ahead and introduce her. Nikki Patterson is an author, educator, educational consultant, and parent success strategist with I Prevail K12 Educational Consulting. She currently resides in Southeast Louisiana with her husband Greg and their 10-year-old son Greg Jr. With more than 10 years of experience working in the public system, Nikki was able to help her students develop a love for learning that allowed them to succeed beyond the classroom and school walls. However, in 2017, after being frustrated with the quality of education her own son Greg was receiving, Nikki left the classroom. Nikki knew that if her methods worked for her students, then surely they would work for her son and his classmates. Nonetheless, after 2 years of partnering with the school system, but having very little autonomy over what Greg was taught and how he was taught, Nikki decided to give her methods a try in a one-on-one setting. And in 2019, the Patterson family began their homeschool journey. In only one homeschool year, academic deficiencies were removed, and Greg was promoted 3 grade levels above his classmates. Three, 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 three. Now, just 3 years later, Greg is 10 years old and in the 7th grade. This method has not only ensured Greg will graduate high school, but do so early. Unfortunately, with more than 270 D and F schools in Louisiana, Nikki realizes that at least 100,000 other Black boys and girls in our state will not have the same opportunities that her son is receiving to get a quality education. So now Nikki shares her success and process with other parents who want to homeschool their children through online courses, trainings, parent workshops, and webinars. And I wanted to make sure to read all of that because she had such great information about how she started this journey, where the journey has taken her, and what benefits she's already started to see in her own son. So I'm so excited about this because I think that the Black community also needs to know that having people just tell you, oh, your child needs medicine, or your child has a learning disorder, or we can't figure the issue out, the child just doesn't know how to behave, is not the answer that we need for our children. Customized education, involvement, and giving them the right support can help us see an amazing turnaround to move them forward. So you are a walking testimony of that, and we're so happy to have you tonight. Thank you for everybody
Thank
that's
you.
dropping in.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we are not going to waste any time. We're going to go ahead and get right into the questions because, honey, when we start talking, it's on in here. If you
Yes.
all have any questions for Miss Nikki, please put them in the comments. I'm asking that you also hit the share button, hit the like button, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the mix with us. So let's start with the first question that we have, okay? What made you decide to leave public education to homeschool Greg Jr.? And I know we talked about that a little bit, but I would like to let you dig into that a little bit more.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me on your platform. I'm excited. Do you hear feedback or something coming through, or it's just on my
It's a
end?
tiny bit of feedback, a little bit. I didn't hear it at first. It's just a tiny
Me
bit, but I
either.
think you're okay unless you can adjust it. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I am a God-fearing woman, have a spiritual base. And I know that education was a purpose and a passion for me. It wasn't just a career or a job, but it's a purpose. And so when I got into education, I wanted to help the students from my community do better. I grew up in poverty and I'm no longer in poverty. And so I knew if it had worked for me, then it was going to work for other students. But I needed to be given that opportunity. And so what happened was I used the methods. I basically went in and I would work with the students on their level. I knew they were 3 grade levels behind, 4 grade levels behind, 5 grade levels. I looked at the standards to figure out where that child was and then created an individual education
Yes.
plan for each child that came through my classroom. It was successful. Those students that came to me, they may have started with lots, but before they left our school, we had about 90 to 95% passing rate for our 8th grade students. So I was excited about that because they moved me to 5th grade. Well, we started losing teachers, and my principal came to me and he said, Nikki, I love your methods, but can we compromise? And at that point in time, my spiritual meter is going up because I'm like, what do you mean compromise? God said, not one of these little ones should perish. And he said, well, you're an excellent teacher. He said, but can, we think about scores, because if I'm going to do that amount of work, that means I'm not getting through all of the things that they're mandating. And so I said, are you asking me to sacrifice students for scores? And he said, well, no, I just think that if you went through more of the curriculum instead of going back through their deficits, then, we can do better as a school. So it was school performance scores over student success. And the next day I resigned.
That's very, very bold and courageous. First of all, let me express a
Yeah,
sincere
I had no plan, no job, no anything. I resigned the next day.
what I love, first of all, is that I'm hearing a zero tolerance attitude about the education of students. And I think that that's very, very commendable and amazing because one of the most difficult challenges now is as a teacher, knowing what's best for our students, but not being in a position where you can present that and not knowing exactly what decision you make. And so, having a zero tolerance attitude about it is a very courageous move to make because you do sacrifice a lot, unfortunately, when you make that choice. leaving those children, leaving your profession that you care about, and leaving the schools quite often in a community that's very dear to you. Um,
Mhm.
and it's so relatable. I've shared before that in my 13 years in the classroom, I was always that teacher that was known for being able to move those test scores forward. But at least once or twice a year, there was a conversation about how are you doing it? How are you making it happen? And things like that. So that I like that. She said that she decided to move. So when you left public school education for that, how did that segue into what you ended up doing with your son, Greg Jr.?
That's a great question. So for me, I worked in a local formal school. So for us to have a 90 to 95% passing rate for our students was unheard of because we were literally a D school. And so it started to move us up to a C school. But what happened was once I left my school, I realized that if I'm a veteran teacher being asked to sacrifice students for scores, my son had a revolving door at his school. A lot of students, a lot of their teachers were coming from like Teach for America, and they were getting there 2 years and they were getting out. And so there was a lot of transit population with the teachers. So for me, I wanted to go in and work with the teachers in the hopes that they would stay. Well, when I got in there, I realized that it was a much bigger problem than what I initially thought. And it wasn't just a student problem or a teacher problem. We had a curriculum problem, we had an expectation problem, we had discipline, we had cultural issues, we had so many different things that I realized that as a parent, I was going to do Proverbs 22:6, where it says, train up a child in the manner in which he should go. And when he goes, he's not going to depart from it. I wanted that, but I couldn't do that if my son was spending 7 hours in the classroom. So, an hour, 30 minutes on the bus in the morning, 30 minutes in the afternoon. And so I realized that I was giving a lot of that autonomy to the school system. Once I started to give solutions to problems that I was seeing, I realized that I didn't have the power that I thought I had, as not only as an educator, but also as a parent, because I received a lot of pushback. When you are in a school that does not have a lot of cultural diversity, his teachers were white, his principal was white, his assistant principal was white. So now they're coming in, and it's more seemed like the angry Black parent who's never satisfied versus the educator who you've worked with for the last 10 years. And she's been able to help her own students, but now I can't help my own son. And that was the last straw for me. It was more or less like, I'm showing you guys methods and solutions that work. And you're basically pushing back because now you're telling me teachers are coming in from other communities and they're going to have to stay later, or they're going to have to do more work, or the lesson plans are already done. But how can you give this child a one size fits all lesson or curriculum when it's not working for any of the students? And that's when I realized it doesn't matter what doesn't work in the system. As a parent, I need to work for my child. So we pulled them.
There's something that is extremely interesting that you just said that I wanted to revisit right quick. When you made the statement of going into this school district where it is predominantly white, nobody that really looks like you, and people that don't necessarily understand you and may not even have an interest in understanding you culturally, and you
Mhm.
come into the building and you address your concerns and not being viewed as an educated professional who has experienced success, but being viewed as an angry Black parent who just
For a
wants to
woman.
cause a ruckus. And a
Yes.
woman, absolutely, Black woman especially. Can
Hmm.
you dig into that more? And here's why I'm asking. One of the key concepts that I've talked about, especially within my consulting, is how so many parents become uninvolved in the school education process, because even if they don't have what we classify as expertise, but they have legit
Hmm.
concerns and they know their children, they are often viewed in the same way when they enter environments where they are the minority, or there's just not a welcome for parents who don't look like the status quo or the norm. So can you kind of dig more into what that's like, and what it does when schools don't listen to parents of color or any parent regarding the diverse needs of our children?
That's an excellent question. For me as an educator, I have worked with a lot of the people that I was now partnering with as a parent. And so to hear Nikki, you don't think that you're threatening some of these first year teachers? And I said, well, how? And they said, well, you're present. If you were a good teacher, then how can you come in now and want them to, not feel threatened by your presence being here? They're thinking that you're going to critique their lessons, or you're going to critique, them. And if they're doing something wrong, then, they'll probably leave because they don't feel like you're supporting them, but you're actually surveilling them. And I said, well, here's the deal. This is an F school. We're 5 points from a state takeover. If these teachers didn't need any assistance, then the parents wouldn't be called on a daily basis. But the parents are only being called for discipline. They're not being called because we have things in place that are welcoming them in. They're being called because now you need their support to discipline their child. But if we create lessons and we create an environment that welcomes the parents in, then that's going to help you with some of the other issues. So as a parent, I always wanted to schedule visits. I wanted to make sure that I was not the room mom, but that I was a supporting parent. So what's the difference? I'm going to show up to events, but I'm not coming here stapling your papers, copy, grading papers, and doing all of that. I'm going to make sure that just being honest, it was like, wait, what? Like, I want to come in, I can volunteer at an event, but that means you have to put the events on. Well, how do I put the events on? Because now you're coming in from out of town, so you don't know what this community wants. Well, send out a survey. So I'm giving all of these solutions and this information to them. So now they're helping to bring parents in. And so the other thing was we scheduled PTA and PTO. When we realized that our voice was not being heard, we created what we called Michael Burroughs Schools Committee. And I talk about it extensively in chapter 2 of my book, How to Win as a Principal. And that committee basically was formed with me, other former educators, parents who had concerns, and we challenged the system on 3 things. We have no Black teachers, but your school system is 95% Black students. You have a DNF school, so why are your expectations so low for these students? What can we do? And you're saying that the parents are coming in, so how can we get the parents in? That committee created and basically gave ideas where we said, hey, you know what? A lot of these parents, or before essential workers became a term, essential workers, they don't have the luxury to say, I'm going to schedule a visit 2 weeks out, because they're just getting their schedules. But your policy is preventing them from coming in because now they need to schedule a visit. So you're saying that they're not coming in, but your policy is preventing them. So why don't you, at the beginning of the year, create a skeletal calendar that basically says this is what we're going to have for this year, so that those parents can plan to be off for those times. And if something comes up, then it's already a tentative date that's scheduled around that time, so they know to put it in. The other thing is nostalgia. You're in a community where parents, we don't have a transit population. So a lot of the people aren't leaving. They remember what the school was like for them, but they don't see it for their children. So if you want parents to come in, then create some events or things that can actually have them to come in. One of the events was when we were growing up, we called it a Halloween bazaar. Many parents don't celebrate Halloween now. So we called it a fall festival. That one event created or generated over $2,600 or $3,600 from the community, because we had a lot of parents came in because they remember and they volunteered. They did all sorts of things. Well, a lot of the teachers felt like that was a lot of Black people on campus. That was the only year that, it wasn't held anymore. So what I'm saying is, a lot of times it's not about the parents, but it's about the comfortability of the students. The teachers and the adults who are not look like the demographics of the community. So a lot of times we say, what can the parents do? But I think it's a joint effort, because we got to realize that the student is the one that's going to suffer if we don't find some type of situation or solution where we pull them together. Absolutely. So we can look at the parents and say, what can the parents do? But also it's also creating an environment so the parents feel welcome to come in.
Balance. Absolutely. And that's so interesting, because that's one of my most common conversations, and something I believe as well, is that we have to find a cohesive balance between supporting our educators and definitely supporting our parents. And even giving the workshops on that, how do we develop those meaningful relationships? And so hearing you talk from the perspective of both a parent as well as an educator, I think is very important, because while we even as we deal with this current season of irregularity, in our school system because of the pandemic, it's even more imperative to me that we dig into those unique ways to try to engage and connect with our parents, um, and realize that we do have obstacles before us, but how can we think outside the box to try to work to overcome those? The other part that I like that you talked about is parents coming together, and realizing that we don't have to know everything or understand everything in order to come together as one to try to figure out what's going to be good and how we can be involved. And I think that's an
Mhm.
important conversation that a lot of people need to hear, because a lot of times the element of fear and worry. And I liked when you talked about nostalgia. Like, I don't believe we address that component of how we really get parents involved enough. And it's interesting because in the community where I live up here, nostalgia is very big, especially for our high schools. People love the
Mhm.
homecomings here are humongous, probably the biggest event of the year. And we're not talking small. I know this past year, one of the high schools had a whole concert, and they have big cookouts. Yes, it is very, very big. So I always think about in those moments, like how the element of nostalgia and that love and those warm feelings, you definitely took me back to that, and how we can channel those type of relationships and feelings into like year-long engagements. And so when you talked about
Correct.
the Halloween bash that used to happen years ago, and how you can bring stuff like that back, that push people to come back to enjoy it on the strength of what appeals to them. Believe it or not, a
Mhm.
lot of times people don't think about that, but getting the buy-in for education is a lot about appealing to people. It is about getting
Correct.
appealing to them. So you're absolutely right. So next
That
question.
was a good point. And just to before you go into your next question, what happened was once we did that and we invited the parents, now the parents are feeling more welcoming towards the teacher. So they were able to now give teacher appreciation dinners, and they wanted to go and sit with the classes while the teachers had their dinners and planning periods and common plan or common lunchtime. They also did like the Thanksgiving where they came in. So once you invite the parents in and the parents feel welcome with that nostalgia, they're able to now see that they can do other things to support you as a teacher. So I thought it was a great idea, and that's some of the things that kept going forward.
I like that. I would like for you guys to please excuse me with this cough. I'm trying to make sure I put it on mute. As most of you all know, I am still trying to recover from COVID. So please excuse the cough, and I don't mean to be rude. So the next question, what has been the greatest difference between homeschool education and public education? And I'd really like for you to dig into that, because I think that there are a lot of parents who have considered homeschool education. We have seen a rise in homeschool education among the black community. I don't feel that we've seen it as quickly here in Louisiana. And I think that that has to do with a lot of things, social class, money, resources available, and people's just feeling of confidence that they can handle it. So I would like to know from you, what has been the greatest difference between homeschool education and public education, and you can talk about positives and negatives.
Okay. So one, positive freedom. You have time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom. Like you just have so much freedom. Even though we're in the middle of our school year, my family and I just returned from Las Vegas and Colorado because my son wanted to see snow. And so for me, we get to travel all year, but he was able to bring his things along. The other thing is he's taking a public speaking class with students from around the country, and some of them are from around the world, in different parts of the world. That's something that he now gets experiences with culture, with different demographics, with different people. That wasn't something that he would have been offered until high school as a public school student. The other thing, I had a doctor's appointment today. I was able to take my son with me, and I didn't have to worry about missed work or making up days or him missing something in class or having to get an excuse. I haven't had to worry about an excuse in like 3 years. And so just the little things. My son used to dread getting up in the morning because it was so early, and then he had to get on the bus, and it was always, if you miss that bus, and I turned into the parent that my mom was, and I didn't want to be that parent. And now my son sleeps in because we don't have to have a 7-hour schedule that's mandated by bulletin this and bulletin that and State Department. And We just have to get the work done. And speaking of work, his interests and talents, his strengths drive the work that we do. Every day, my son is looking at something. Right now, his speech for this week is his big dream. And he's talking about how he wants to be a lawyer. And in our curriculum, we put a lot of Black history in because our schools weren't teaching it. And so the movie Marshall, about Thurgood Marshall, and also Just Mercy, is what literally prompted him to want to be a lawyer. And he's talking about it. If I could read, I'm gonna probably post it on my own site because I recorded him reading it. And I kid you not, these are not my words; these are his words. And so, just being a homeschool student has given him strengths and opportunities that would have stifled him in school. I remember I had taught him how to write in cursive, write his name at least, but he had not gotten the G correct, the capital G. So he was writing a lowercase g. And in school, I received this letter and then followed up by an email stating that my son could no longer write in cursive because he could not form the capital G. And so as a parent, I started, of course, I'm gonna help him write this G. But then I realized y'all are doing stations and centers in class. That could be one of his individual tasks. Put out a letter G in cursive and let him practice that as his handwriting. He's in first grade. But I realized the curriculum was so stifled and so one size fits all that even though they're differentiation, even though they're saying that they're for all learners, it wasn't for all learners. And it was just like, whoa, it was mind boggling. So to see my son now being able to bake, sort clothes and wash clothes, we do budgeting and financing, and he's always thinking about entrepreneurship over employment and what he can do to start a new business. All of these would have been high school level courses that he would have not even gotten to in the elementary school. So to see that is definitely, rewarding for me. One of the things that I struggled with when I first left the public school system as a teacher, I wanted to follow the public school system, their curriculum, and their schedule. So it was time consuming and tedious. And I realized I am not in the public school system. I don't need to spend 7 hours a day in front of this computer or in front of him teaching him. He's one child. So he can definitely go through a lesson, get the I do, you do, we do, or I do, we do, you do in one day. So 1 week's lesson could take us one day. So we were finishing things early, but then we did fractions and I noticed that he didn't do something. Hey, Greg, measure this for me. Go get the fraction cup that says this. And so we were always reiterating and, like reinforcing what he needed to do or what he had done in school. We were doing it at home. So now my son is 10 and I'm proud to say that he will be ready to not only be an upstanding citizen, but a great father, a great, husband, and a great man, Black man at that. So homeschool definitely has a lot of positives, but I'm not against the public school system simply because of some of the reasons you said originally. I'm able to stay at home because my husband works. So a lot of people don't have that luxury. So I will never say that I'm all for homeschool. That's why I continue to reform the public school system, even as I homeschool my own son.
I like that. I like that. Continue to advocate for the public school system even while you are homeschooling your son. And I think that that's one of the things that people also have to understand. A lot of times people think, oh, well, if you're choosing this system over this system, then that means that you're not an advocate or a supporter of this system. And I don't believe that that's the truth. I believe that when you make the decision to do what you feel is in the best interest of your child, then that's your responsibility as a parent. What you do to work with others and support them means that you also recognize where there is a missing element, but your goal is also to ensure that those kids get the opportunities that they need and deserve. And I believe that that's exactly how we should be as a people. That we should see that just because my child is doing well or I'm in this place does not mean I don't recognize the need or the deficiency in another place and I'm willing to give and serve. And I think that's a very important statement to hear. Very important statement to hear. So next question. Let me see. We just have so many places I want to go with this. So let's kind of talk about the work you've been doing with accountability and diversity. And I think that we'll end up coming back to homeschool and how the decision to homeschool and homeschool life is tied into this. So this
Okay.
is what's being really exciting for me with you. You've done some great work to increase accountability for diversity and inclusion in Louisiana. You
Mhm.
were on the board to help evaluate the standards for the curriculum regarding social studies in this
Correct.
area where we are dealing with critical race theory.
Race
And let me make
theory.
sure theory, because I don't believe there's anything theoretical about it. Facts have been proven. Um,
Correct.
facts have been proven. Uh, what has the experience been like to work with this initiative, and why is that work so important to you?
Oh my God, that is a great question. I have thoroughly enjoyed this process. Reviewing and revising the K through 12 social studies standards for Louisiana for social studies has been amazing. For one, like I said, my son attended schools where there were no Black teachers or Black leaders. So he as an individual was not being nurtured. He was being seen as a group or collective. And so to get the opportunity to go in, because when I applied, I literally applied as a Black voice, a reformer, like John the Baptist. I can remember just as I spoke all of this, one who's crying out in the wilderness, Moses, let my people go. And I'm like, they chose me because, like, and that's what I brought to the actual committee. It was more or less like, we're going to start from kindergarten and we're going to figure out what do our Black children need. There
Absolutely.
were people, and when I say Black children, there were people who signed up. They wanted to go represent the Native American perspective. There were people who wanted to go, be opponents of CRT. And so it was different things. So for me, I needed to stay in my voice as a Black leader, as a Black reformer. And so looking at the K through 12 standards, that's where homeschooling came in a lot more than even being an educator, because I had to think outside of the box. There were so many things that were missing from our curriculum, but there were things that parents didn't even realize that were in our curriculum. And so getting that opportunity to work with the standards at every grade level, I was not only able to say, okay, as a parent, this is what that child would need. Like as a kindergarten child who's left on a bus, where do you live? Do you know how to get to your home? Are we putting map skills there for the local community? And so that was one of the best experiences when I got with my son and I knew I wanted to teach him about being Black in America. I had to reform my idea of what we taught and how we taught in the public school system. And so I was able to take that format and move it over to Louisiana state standards. And so a lot of the people, parents and teachers are going to see now that our standard shifted. Things that we once taught in sixth grade are now going to be taught in third grade. And that was because of some of the experiences some of the situations that I experienced working with the committee. You had a lot of people who, when you heard diversity, inclusion, equity, those were buzzwords for Black people trying to change history.
Oh,
And I can remember,
look. Well, and the weird thing
I
is
can
that
remember, uh-huh.
look, and the weird thing is, like when people say trying to change history, the problem is that it's not history if it's not accurate. So nobody's
History.
trying to change it. We're trying to make sure that it's true and being accurately
Yeah,
presented. Go ahead. I
yeah.
just, that's always
And
so
it was
funny to me.
funny. It was funny because when they said that at one of the meetings, and I believe it was the June meeting, like we had a lot of parents from rural communities across Louisiana there at that meeting. And they were literally like, the people had to walk us to our cars because like they were serious about like getting into the committee members' faces and the teachers, and like it was crazy. And I just recently read an article for Education Week, and they were talking about it, like how they interview people. And so one of the things when we talked about diversity and equity, um, it was like, well, what about all the white contributions? And like, and these are like public comments that people are making, and it was just the experiences where you're seeing state representatives come there and voice these ignorant opinions. Well, what about the good of slavery? You're having to be
So you
professional.
heard that infamous line personally. You heard somebody at that
Oh, I
infamous, what about
recorded
the
it
good
and
of
put it on.
slavery?
this state representative recorded and put it on my page because I needed them to hear from my phone. Like, I didn't want the whole meeting recorded. But when these people started coming in and talking about, why do we have to talk about black and white? You're creating more races. Racism doesn't exist. If you're going to talk about, like, where's our old Dixie and where's our state song and our state bird, and you're
Which are
moving it
all
down.
rooted
That
in
should be
racism.
that.
Which are all rooted in, like Dixie, all of that is rooted in racism. So it's like
Yeah,
you really want your story told, but nobody else's.
it is hilarious, but now looking back, it was like, wow, God, you really showed up and showed out, because I would not have had that experience had it not been for God. Like, for me, personally, because there was a lot of people applied to work with the standards, and
Yeah.
it was a diverse group of people who were chosen. But amongst those, you had a bunch of people who wanted to keep things the way they are. And, so for me now, hearing things from my own son, and he's like, hey, mom, they're talking about Russia. Where's Russia? And I'm realizing the curriculum doesn't even go into the countries of other continents. And now we're having a discussion behind the scenes. Well, why do we want to talk about other continents? America's the greatest. It was like just hearing some of these opinions and thoughts from people who were at different levels. Not just, I mean, this wasn't just, the committee consisted of students and parents and educators and professors and curriculum specialists and state representatives. And you're hearing some of the ignorance, and you're like, this person represents me? Nah, that's not, because you're sitting there and you're like, wow, this is their thoughts. These are the thoughts of people who want change. And it was more or less like, like, we cannot, like, for instance, I didn't realize it. 6th grade, they had the African American spirituality as voodoo. I'm like, wait, what? And I was like, no, we got to go back to Kemet. We got to go back to Nubia. We got to go back to Okay Bulong. We got to talk about these Dead Sea Scrolls. We got to, and so you're going to see some of that language popping up now in the new curriculum. But I was like, tooth and nail, because that's too specific. Well, I said, well, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about all life form began in Africa. And then we're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about the oldest species was a Black woman who was found. So we need to start talking about it. So now I'm getting pushed back because you say you're God-fearing. How can you start debating the Bible? I was just like, y'all, they've been teaching this to us for decades and centuries.
But you know what the weird. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
In the school system, and because someone's now digging into it, presenting it to you, and you're being slapped in the face with it, now I'm atheist, or I don't believe. And I'm like, our children are being taught these things, but the church is teaching something different. And so for me, it became, how can we continue to allow our curriculum to be whitewashed with these traditional European beliefs? But you're going to fight me because now I'm putting something Black in the curriculum, but it doesn't align with what the church is teaching. But its truth, its accuracy, its history. And you have a problem with me, but you don't have a problem with, Christopher Columbus, who never came to America. We're celebrating him. We have a holiday for him. It's like, wait, what do you mean he came to America? Yes, he did. No, he never stepped foot on any of these 50 United States. Like, but we're not taught those things. And so that's why, for me, I was excited to not only be a homeschool parent, transitioning to the Louisiana, Committee for Reviewing and Revising the K12 Standards, but also an educator, because now I'm realizing some of the things that I taught to my students based upon what was in the textbook. So the whole process and all the experiences were eye-opening, but also enjoyable.
I think it's so interesting to hear you talk about how whitewashed religion plays such a big role, in essence, in the supremacist mindset, and how
Mm-hmm.
living in an area that is referred to as the Bible Belt is also a direct confirmation of just how prevalent supremacist mindsets and practices are. And
Mm-hmm.
the mere fact that people don't even want accuracy, like when you open the Bible up and flip it to the back, there's a map that shows you exactly where the cities are that they speak of in the Bible, and most of them are in Africa or in quote unquote the Middle East. And so, which, and they're called connected. There, what is that? I think the Red Sea that runs right between the corner of Africa and the Middle East. Like,
but if we talk about history, we're going to realize that the Red Sea wasn't even the Red Sea when it was there, because it was this beautiful green blue water that was there, and because of the dye that came from the reeds. Like, so I'm trying to get them to put all of these things in there. And we're going to talk about Middle East, we have to talk about the Ottoman War, since we're going to talk about wars that actually annexed this Middle East from Africa. And now you have territories fighting over it. So now we have people that are now living in this Middle East, but then we got to talk about Mesopotamia, which we all learn, but nobody's that's in Africa. We got to talk about the oldest university in the world is in Africa. We got to talk about a whole bunch of things. So when we talk about those things, that's where you get the pushback, because now the Red Sea is in everybody's mind. Moses put it the Red Sea. But when you go to start the pharaohs, it's like, wait, which one died in the river? Wait, hold on. There's no census report of any. So you start to realize, like, these people have been teaching things and they've been have all of these lessons, but because you don't have a lot of Black history teachers, and when I mean by Black, I mean Black female or male teachers that teach social studies in the public school system. No one's challenging the whitewashing or the European perspective that's being taught to our children. So now you have everything being accepted. And so now when you're pushing back and you're sharing those things, it's like, oh my God, the devil has gotten hold of her and she is, like just really, really out of her mind. She done lost it. She don't love God anymore. And I'm like, we're teaching the same things. If you study L.K. Boulan and what it actually means, the Garden of Eden, like they took our history, our knowledge, the scrolls that were open. Where were those scrolls? Oh, they were in Africa. But nobody teaches us those things. So we need to start teaching our children that, so we can stop thinking that we all came from like slavery and this, that, and the other. And we can actually start understanding and embracing our rich history, our amazing history, and the different tribes and cultures. So much we can go into, but I literally tried for each grade level to put some of that into it. And hopefully the parents and the teachers start to see more Black history throughout each grade level, K through 12.
I wish we had the time to dig further into the because I've talked about the whole concept. Like I used to tell people all the time, I'm like, we have to deal with this whole Middle East situation, which is really a part of Africa, and nobody likes to talk about that. And to this day, it's still, and people don't like to have that conversation. I said, and I truly believe that it's been emphasized as such is because it's one of the ways to continue to try to whitewash or disconnect the Bible from Africa. Does it work? No, but it's a method. People love to just say the Middle East as if it's a separate entity. I'm like, are we not reading the same book? Are we not reading the same component of history? So I know you and I will get so far into that component because it's so we'll have to come back to that because it's so real. But what I'm glad to hear is about how you are advocating for more of history to be integrated into each grade level, because let me tell you something, I absolutely do believe, I was having this conversation last week, as a matter of fact, I did a TikTok about it. I said, do y'all remember when we were growing up in my hometown and they used to make us do this American flag tribute, and they would play that song, if tomorrow all my things were gone, I worked for that was the all-American whitewash education song. And you had this giant American flag, and the part was like, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I mean, you are being indoctrinated to believe that the American dream is this wife, this child, these star eyes that are just for this country. And then he was like, and I'm proud to be an American, and we will hold the flag up. And girl,
wait, free. But
no, and let me tell you something. Look, I have been emotional all my life, Nikki. I would be in there crying behind this song. They are whitewashing me. This little second grader who was praying I got picked to hold that flag up.
Yes. And that was one of the things.
I can't recall anything really important that I learned, except for the fact that my teacher dressed up like, I thought she dressed up like Harriet Tubman one time. And I remember that moment. But as far as the curriculum really engaged in teaching us the facts, there was none of that. And so, but there
Mhm.
was this create this feeling of American pride, and this is what Americanism looks like, and making it very one dimensional and not inclusive. To hear them start to tell us, that America is this great melting pot, quote unquote. I call it a pot of gumbo, but that melting pot is literally about you melting it into one flavor. That's what a melting pot is.
Correct.
And that one
Correct.
flavor was not inclusive or reflective of my history, the Native American history, the Asian history, the Hispanic history. It was not. And when instead we should in
Correct.
fact be a pot of gumbo, where it is taking the flavors and the stories and everything of everybody and creating this delicious flavor that is America. And so I'm really
And
excited
that's
to hear you
something they
talk about
want to
that.
change because the parents feel like kindergarten and first grade is too young. And if you go to the Louisiana Department of Education's website, Louisiana Believes, you will see that there's a public comment for parents and people to leave comments for the standards that we were rewriting and creating. And diversity and inclusion and equity became, it's too young for my child to hear those words, to learn those words. And if you're going to talk about inclusion, are you talking about like two parent households being same sex? And you're going to, like, all of these comments are there. And people are just spewing this type of thing. And it's like they really have their idea of what the public school system should be like and what it should not include. And so for me as a parent, my son experienced more than one episode of racism in first grade. And I shared those with them. And I said, so if he's old enough to experience racism, then why is your child not old
Absolutely.
enough to learn about
Absolutely.
racism? And they said, well, you're going to guilt my child. I said, so my child's experience is not valid. And so they want to put our experiences based upon emotions. No, we have emotions because that's the traumas that come from the experiences and
Come on.
situations we deal with coming from you. But
Preach, mother.
yes, like we have those emotions, but our situations are factual. It actually happened to my son. My son came home and he was no longer a peach boy. He was a little black boy, couldn't get a bracelet because she can only give it to white boys. I mean, white children. But the teachers had them did something that, unbeknownst to me, my son was intelligent. One of three students in first grade able to read, not on grade level, able to read. So they had created a class of 25 where there were only three black students and the rest of them were white. So he was going to experience that. So when I started going in class and now I'm recognizing, oh, wait, hold on, this is not a predominantly black school because by that time he had changed schools, but this has at least a 50-50 makeup. Why is he sitting in the class with three or two other black children? So now I'm questioning too much. So now we got to change the policies for how parents come in. So now you have to schedule your visit. I don't care if I have to schedule it or not. You're going to change the makeup of this classroom. So by the time I came in the next time, because he didn't already experience two racist situations, and you don't want me to meet the teachers, you don't want me to meet the parents, you don't want me to know the parents' name, none of that. Well, I'm going to come in here every day until you change the makeup of this classroom because he needs support. If I can't be here, then he needs support. And so eventually that classroom changed, but that became the angry black woman. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't come in here with any type of weapon or hair tied up or anything. I came in here as a professional because I challenged your policies, your practices, and your procedures. Now all of a sudden I'm angry and I'm black. But where was that same energy for that little white child who was giving my son a new experience? So no, our experiences are based upon the situations you put us in, and the emotions that come behind it are the traumas that we feel. So instead of my son being traumatized, no, let me teach your child how you traumatized, how your people have traumatized my people over the years. And it's not guilt, it's accuracy, it's fact, and it's history.
Come on. There are so many things that I want to say in regards to that. I'm going to start with the first thing in regards to your son, Greg Jr., having experienced racism so young. That's one of the conversations I've had is that our kids, unfortunately, especially young black boys, experience racism so early. And a lot of times our kids aren't even old enough to understand what's going on. We have to teach them.
Correct.
The instances I've had where my child is going to the play area at McDonald's, or when he would go to the play area at a Chick-fil-A, and this is not about the restaurant, it's about what happens with people who are visiting there. So it's not about the restaurant, it's about the guests they have, which they have no
Correct.
control over. But and going into those play areas and white kids getting up leaving, watching their parents come get them. My son is 3 or 4 years old, and watching them come and get their children, overhearing parents say, it's just too many kids here now. And then coming to remove your child from the play area and pull your child away from playing with my child right in my face. So should I have to see, the problem becomes that it's not about whether your child is too young to be taught about racism. It's about whether your child is too young to realize that they are being indoctrinated by their parents who have racist beliefs. And that is the issue. People don't want accountability. Because, see, when it comes to really teaching our children what racism is about in an early grade, we're not teaching them about racism. What we're teaching about is love, respect, and honor for each other. You can teach children that without even specifically addressing race, because kids are innocent and they don't know. But when we start addressing the issues and the disparities and the challenges that other people went through, and start teaching our kids what love and fairness and kindness really looks like, kids start holding you accountable because they're innocent. They don't know. They start asking questions. And then as parents, you have to assess yourself. White supremacy is indoctrinated into a lot of people very early. When I wrote my last book, Treads, it was very interesting to me that I received, I wrote this novel thinking I wanted everybody to read it to get an understanding of the Black culturalism experience, the emotional experiences of Black women, the trauma, that component. But the number of white people who reached out to me that I grew up with, that I had met along the way, to share with me a lot of the practices that went on the other side of the door. I might have been Billy Bob, nice guy at school, but at home, I'm being taught this. I can be nice to my schoolmates, but Black people can't come to my house. How many times did I have to hear those lessons and have heard those lessons over the years that have been taught? So when you talk about people saying it's too early for my child to learn that, it's because, unfortunately and very sadly to hear, if we start teaching them about unity, diversity, fairness, inclusivity, and all of that at a young age, it means it starts to break down the rooted teachings of supremacy at an early age. And people don't want to admit it. It's not a public conversation, but it is absolutely true. People don't want you to interfere with what they have been teaching and promoting. And our state in particular has a big problem with promoting the white supremacist platform and mindset. We have a diversity and inclusion problem in this state. We have a social class problem in this state. And people don't want to break from it because they feel that they are losing power. And I'm so glad that you talked about that part.
You have hit something that was so important, because now the conversation of racism breaks down to social class or caste. And for me, I want to separate both of those, but because if you're looking and you are at McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, that actually creates an economy or an economic situation that you both in together. There is no differentiation between the economies that you guys have or the finances. You both can afford it. But what created the differentiation or the difference was your skin tone. So when people start to tell me that racism is social, economic, and no, it's the skin tone before it's going to be social economic, because we can be sitting in some of the same places and I will still get treated or mistreated because I'm a Black woman or because I'm a Black person. Absolutely. My husband will still have to move to the other side because the white woman's still going to grab her purse if we're getting on the elevator.
Absolutely.
So it's just different things. She don't know how much money he has in his pocket. So I wanted to break that down because a lot of times we're moving away from conversations of importance and diluting them by giving another reason by giving another situation. And so right now people are like afraid and upset because you have a lot of people who, I didn't grow up in Africa. I'm not from Africa, because now we're saying, hey, all life form began in Africa. So what's the new story they're telling? Well, it wasn't actually Africa. It was America. And I'm like, what? America was here before Africa.
Yep.
And you have Black people that are spewing that. And it's like, so why does Africa have over 1 billion Black people? If the first Black person, if the first person was a Black person, why wouldn't America have more Black people than Africa if America was here first? Why would it not be as populated, heavily populated, if Africa was colonized and riches and all of those things? Why is that the mother? Like, it's just so many different questions. But if they can give you another narrative, like social caste instead of color, like America instead of Africa, like we're all human and there's no color. I don't see color. But you saw it when we had to watch your white Jesus on our wall. But now, because Jesus is a Black man and we're learning that he had bronze, like now all of a sudden we see no color.
We see no color.
But you see when you get up in the morning to put color on.
Yeah.
You see when you make something. But it's only when it comes down to those things. So that's why it's important for me to get on a social studies committee and talk to them. That's why it's important for me to homeschool my son and work with other homeschool parents or even public school parents who want to give that diversity to their children, because no one's going to teach you who it is. And I believe it was Marcus Garvey who says a people without knowledge of their history is bound to repeat it. So for us, we need to not repeat the things that were bad, but use the things that were bad to teach us so that we can progress forward. And that's what I'm all about, progressing forward, but not forgetting where I came from, not forgetting what has happened, and using those things as lessons and stepping stones to build and grow the next generation.
And that quote is never more important than it is right now when we consider what's going on with the Voting Rights Act. And when we talk about the threat of repeating up in a very bad position, is never more important than it is right now. Look where we are right now, and the thing that concerns me is that I don't think that in particular our people see and allies of the Black community and people of color understand the urgency around this topic, the urgency around people saying they can't come to an agreement on making voting rights a non-negotiable act, because the truth is there was a Black president elected and then Black women saved the state of Georgia, and all of a sudden we have 1,000 things now that they want to change or revise, and now we can't get people to pass something that should be a non-negotiable issue anyway. So when you talk about the possibility of history repeating itself, all of these things are tied into one. All of these things, and I think that is particularly problematic to me because I feel that we are here in Louisiana, where 1/3 of our population is Black. 1/3 of our population. 1/3. The most popular city in this state is predominantly Black.
Yeah.
And we still struggle. I think Baton Rouge is even predominantly Black. And we still struggle to have the Black voice be heard. There should not be an issue where we want to fight over whether or not the history should include Black people, when Black people are the foundation of how this country came to be. There's almost nothing. And the more I study, the more we keep learning about these facts and these resources. But who we know receive patents, the Black folks we don't know receive patents. There's nearly everything we know about has Black cultural influence on it because of the position we were in and the work that we did. Yet we're fighting just to have an accurate story be told. And so I think that we have to understand how very important it is to ensure that we have a voice that is also showing up at these meetings, that is expressing how they feel. So let me ask you about that part. When we talk about the level of diversity and inclusion and Black presence for these committees you were on, what was that like? And do you think that the Black citizens of Louisiana and Black people of the country really understand how important it is that we be vocally engaged in educational curriculum?
Wow, another great question. For starters, it wasn't as diverse. We didn't have an equal number of Black people and white people. There were obviously more white people on the committee. The other thing I noticed is there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about a prophet is without honor in their own hometown. Even though I'm sitting on the committee,
One of
even
my
though I'm
faves.
sharing the information, even though I'm sharing the information, Assumption Parish, where I reside, had no public comments. And I asked them to go and place public comments because I was sharing with them how they were removing the things that I was saying. But I've been speaking this to my people, that local people, for the last 4 or 5 years. So now the things that you're like, rah, 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 I agree, I support, you're allowing them to take it out because you didn't support, you didn't go in. And so what I noticed is Black people are not a monolithic people. We're very diverse people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we're going to go in and we're going to have this conversation, we need to remove those that are going to assimilate. We need to have strong voices. And so some people that sat there were willing to assimilate so that we can come to a consensus. I was not. I knew that there were too many failing schools in my community that served Black students. So that means my community had some of those students or schools that were included in those more than 200 plus DNF schools, because all the Black schools in my community are DNF. So I saw it firsthand. So no, I'm not going to go in there and assimilate. I'm not going to go in there and kumbaya and be quiet. But there were some people that were willing to do that just so that we can get out, just so that we can, save face, just so that we aren't seen as disruptive, angry, all of those things that we've been labeled. And for me, I'm at the place right now where I don't care. Label me what you want, but you're going to hear my voice. You're going to change what needs to be changed for those students. And so once people realize, like, wait, hold on, she's not aggressive, she's passionate. She's not going to curse you out or hit you or punch you or anything like that. But she will get all of her points out very succinctly. She's going to tell you how, where it was, the background, all of those things. And so that is what threatens people. And so that's what I found out a lot of. They are not necessarily concerned about who sat on the committee as much as what they said. And if we can get your people around you to soften your voice, so Nikki's there, but there wasn't another Nikki, if that makes sense. Right. So the people around me were trying to coddle me, like, you're good, like, chill. And so I had more white people who were coming out of the woodworks and saying, yep, because I agree with what she said and this, that, and the other. And you had some Black people who were, well, why does everything have to be about Black? We have other, identities. We have other cultures. And I'm like, I signed up to be the Black voice. That lady signed up to be the Native American voice. That lady signed up to be LGBT. That lady signed up. I said, so I don't know what y'all talking about, sis. I can't understand. I don't understand that. But that's the other thing. Being relatable. I came from poverty and I'm not there. And so I have my own journey, my own story that I can actually share. Whereas some people never grew up in poverty. And so they can't relate. So their thing is, I'm Black and I work in a Black school, if that makes sense. So now I have the same experience. No, you don't have the same experiences as me. I have a lot of similar experiences as the students that are in those, low performing schools now. So if I go here and I'm not going to advocate for them, if I'm going to sit on this board and I'm going to, sit there and say why I'm too loud, or believe why I'm too loud, then I'm doing an injustice to not only them, but to my son. And so, it was experience where I realized we were not a monolithic people, but we were very diverse people. And I had to respect that I may have needed to come out of the woodworks a lot more or I was coming out a lot more than other people, but I could not diminish what they were bringing to the group, no matter if they were Black, white, purple, green, Asian, boy, girl, LBG, whatever. I learned a lot by just listening, but also standing my ground when I needed to.
Standing my ground when I needed to. And I love the part, and we can dig into that later, about why we have certain people who look like us who come to the table and want to push this kumbaya image during a time when you are being underrepresented. You are not being included. Mm-hmm. So pushing the kumbaya image does nothing if it does not approach truth and it's not meeting the needs of people who have been excluded for a long time. We'll come back around to that. I'm going to ask you one more question. Okay. And we're going to go to the next one. So the next question says, what are some of the most interesting? Well, we kind of talked about that. So we're going to do, what do you think are the keys to reforming public schools in regards to diversity and inclusion and meeting the needs of all children of Louisiana? What are some of the keys you think regarding diversity and inclusion and meeting the needs of all children of Louisiana?
Okay, so as an education reformer and someone who really wants to improve public school systems, for me, one of the things that I realized is the three P's. You need people, you need a pocketbook or some type of financing, and you also need policy. When we think about the people, sometimes we're only thinking about the teachers or the administrators, and if they come in and they do their job, then we're going to be good. But we also need parents advocating for their children. And so when we look at it, it's like some type of committee needs to be formed where these parents and these teachers are getting together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to not only share their own individual ideas for what success looks like, but what are the deficits that their own children are facing. And so when you start to bring it in from a personal perspective, then you're going to be a lot more committed to what's going on. The other thing is the pocketbook, the finances. A lot of our communities are underfunded because we're getting taxpayer dollars. And so you have a lot of schools that are leaving or coming up and being formed in newer communities. And those taxpayer dollars in those communities are now subsidizing their schools. So not only did they get a new school, but now they also have a new school with public school funds, but their community taxes are going only specifically to their schools. In the low income communities, we don't have that. A lot of our taxes are very minimal. And so when they're asking for like MFP and millage and all of those things, not MFP, like millage, and we're going to do a 1% tax and this, that, and complaining, but we don't have ways to improve it based upon like property taxes and new houses coming in for those low income communities. And so literally finding a way to get equitable funding for it. So now you have the parents and the working together and they're discussing the issues and they're truthfully discussing. And now you need policies that specifically pertain to those schools and those students that need that support. So what do I mean? I worked with my last superintendent and we created something called the Big Ten Goals. The idea was I one of the reasons I moved my son is because uh, prison builders, I was going to say facilitators, but builders, use the third and fourth grade floors or second, third, and fourth floors of Black students from low income communities to determine how many beds they will need by the time that child turns 18. Not graduate, but by the time that child turns 18. And so I presented that information to the former superintendent. And I said, what's your plan for ensuring that our students get their scores up so that they're not a statistic? And he said, okay, well, let's work together. So he created a committee at the office. It was exclusive of parents and community members. So now the people who've always made the policies are now making the policies. That doesn't work. So when you come back and you bring them to us, guess what? It has 10 big goals. And they're talking about all the things that they want to fix. But there's nothing that talks about what the parents needed. Right. And so now all your Black schools are failing. But there's no specific goal that states how you're going to get those Black schools up. And so that's what I mean by policy. We need to create specific and intentional policies for what we're going to do to improve those schools. And so when we're looking at that, when I looked at my son's deficits, most people say, well, how did your son have deficits? He left the public school system with a 4.0 because parents want to see surface level. Surface level means those grades are all we want to see. We want to post those grades. My son had a 4.0 all through school. He was one of 3 reading in the first grade, all of those things. But when it came down to it, and I had to test my own son based upon the expectations and standards I had for where that child needed to be based upon what Louisiana, he had deficits. And so we spent time trying to close those deficits. But what if the school system had policies because he was attending a low performing school that had already Black students, and the state has already said we have over 200 DNF schools that service more than 100,000 Black students? What would have happened had my superintendent or the leaders been more intentional about creating policies that were already addressing what the State Department was considering a need, we would be a lot further along. And so that's some of the things that I really think the people, the pocketbook, and the policies will definitely be something that can be game changers for school improvement in not just Louisiana, but public education.
It's so interesting that you brought up the concept of basically measuring where schools should be across the board, and what you said is, let's go back and revisit this, because when I worked in high schools and I would tell people about just working in environments where I knew the student performance and potential was not being fully reached. And I would hear
Mhm.
people say, well, such and such is an honor student and such graduated with a 4.0, but ACT score is an 18. And that student can't get into
Yes,
school that students with a 4.0 at another school and is making a 30 on the ACT can get into.
correct.
Schools where I work, you may only have 2 or 3 college credit courses, while my cousin's daughter, who I call my niece, graduated from high school with over 30, with approximately 30 college credits, 30 college hours, and was a full semester ahead of the game by the time she entered school,
Mhm.
and had been prepared so well that she will finish college a year early. So I've had to have that conversation with saying, no disrespect, but being a superstar in a failing environment is not a superstar when you cannot compete in other settings across the board. And it's not a criticism of the child, it's acknowledging that these students deserve more opportunities. They need
Correct.
more resources. And we have to come to the table as parents and say, if my child is committed to academic excellence, if my child is committed to doing well, then it is the responsibility of this school setting to provide the right opportunities for them to move forward. It makes no sense
Yeah.
that in one place in Louisiana, you should have some opportunities here that get kids prepped for college or get them college credits, take them on field trips, has active school organizations that are encouraging them to
Yes.
become
Yes.
leaders. And then you go to another part of the state and they barely have enough chalk in the classroom and they haven't even elevated from to a smart board in every class. It should not be like this.
That is
That is
true.
not providing balance. And we can't, what you said is so true. It's a personal ego stroke to us sometimes when we see that our kid comes out with the 4.0 and it doesn't matter what environment. But if there is not the right opportunity being given, this amount some accountability is necessary. Stepping up and
Yes.
saying
Yes.
something is necessary. And I wholeheartedly agree with you as a classroom educator or former classroom educator and as a parent. And a lot of people couldn't understand a lot of my theories and practices when it came to my son. But when he entered a classroom setting where he was in pre-K and he's the only kid in the class that has mastered the alphabet and is already starting sight words,
Speak.
don't we have an
Yes.
issue at
Yes.
hand that we need to address. And it's
Yes.
not just
You're
about
doing too
him,
much, girl.
it's
So
about
slow
what
down. You're
we're
doing
doing.
too much. You doing too much. That boy don't need to know all of that. They gonna teach him in
And
school.
literally being told
I was
this,
like
and
blown
literally
away.
being told this, was
Yes, I
told
was
this.
blown away. Like, they won't teach him in school. Like,
Exactly.
that's
I'm
why
like, do you realize this
you
is
as
what
the
he
leader
wants to
there.
do?
Like, you got to teach your child.
And this is the thing. There's not an expectation to say, oh, every child should be able to do what Greg Jr. is doing. Every child we encounter should be able
No,
to
that's not
excel.
the
But what we're
expectation.
saying is that there should be resources and educational opportunities available for every single child who has a need. And that there are things that can be given to especially our children of color, who are quite often pushed to the side, who are given a
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis at an early age, so that the
Mm-hmm.
education system or people in the education system do not have to invest in making sure that they are fairly educated. And trust and believe, one
Correct.
reason is because lack of education continues to promote indirectly supremacy practices.
And that
So
school
we
to
don't,
prison pipeline system.
it gets them right because there's already the assumption when they come in that this child can be prepped to go right into that direction. And being that we are in a state where the
Yep.
prison pipeline makes money, please understand that it is a mission to ensure that there are young men and women of color to go in that direction.
Who can keep
And
people
I
in
think
those
that is a
beds. I
very
mean, you think
important
about what that
conversation.
sheriff said. when he said, think about what the sheriff said. I think he was from an upstate prison or something. And he said, you're letting all of our good black, our good prisoners go. I was like, isn't that the goal, to reform them and let them go back to society as decent human beings? But maybe the goal was never to do it. It was almost like a fugitive slave law again with the 13th Amendment. And so we're looking at all of that. But, for me, one of the biggest things is people think that if I put something out there, that's what I want for every child. Like if I say Greg is doing this, I'm not saying I want that for every child. But I had a principal who told me, Nikki, you're the only one that will come in here and see, does the test question match the standard that the State Department is asking us? Everyone else only wants to know, do we love their child, and are they cutting and coloring in kindergarten and first grade? And I was appalled. And that conversation took on a whole new meaning of advocacy. No, like, I don't care who you are at this point in time, you're not going to tell me that that's your expectation and you're okay with that as a leader. I don't know why you allowed that to come out of your mouth, especially not towards me, because I'm going to tell everybody. She was like, so of course that starts this whole little, what do you mean? We can't, no, we weren't having conversation because I don't know you like that, boo. Like, you're not my friend. I'm coming here to tell you.
No.
Yeah, like I'm coming here to tell you how you can do better for these students, and you're going to tell me. You must have thought that you was, about to make me feel some type of way because I'm coming here to ask you, well, the teacher had this on the board, but how does a squiggly line lead to the standard that this child needs to know for this grade? Well, that's going to build up. Well, they've been building up all semester because she never moved past that. And as a parent, I'm concerned because this child needs to master this standard, this standard, this standard. Well, Nikki, you're the only one who come in here and say, and I'm like, as a leader, you're honestly letting that come out of your mouth? Well, this is a private. No, boo, I'm going to tell everybody you done said. Like, it was like, how do you, like, I'm coming in here. I'm not even coming in here as somebody who's kumbayaing with you. Never have, never will. And this is a private. No. But you know what else happened? That was an assistant principal. That was a principal there. There were Black leaders there, and no one else said anything. So this lady and I are going back and forth. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, y'all are directors. Y'all are central office staff. Y'all are right below the superintendent. How is it that this lady can come in here and say that, and she still has a job? This lady was the same one who said, because she couldn't get the students under control when she became a principal, that they were ghetto savage thugs. You're working in predominantly Black communities. And you know what the parents said? Oh, she didn't say that to my student because my child wasn't in that class. But if she had said it to my student, I'm like, isn't your child in that grade level? Yeah, but my child wasn't in that class when she made that statement. And it's just like, it baffles me just, I would say absent-minded, because I won't even say ignorance. It's just a willful absent-mindedness to play that role of, it doesn't concern me, it doesn't bother me. And so for me, I wish that's something that I wish parents would do. If you see someone who is sharing knowledge with you, who's been in a system, who you see is doing well, don't fear that person or feel like they're being arrogant, but accept that help and actually partner with them and figure out how you can, I'm like the one with the issue of blood. I want to touch the hem of the garment, like just get in that circle and just like, just get in there and figure out how you can be a part of. You may not know anything about what they're talking about, but instead of feeling inferior, because that's a choice, and offense is a choice, but get in there and figure out, what, I want better for my child. And I see she has it. I see Jamie's doing it. I don't feel threatened, but really get in there and dive deep in what is it that you want for your child. And so that's what I tell parents.
You have a right.
What does success look like?
And understand that you have a right to be there and to be involved in that atmosphere and to ask those questions. You have a right to do that. So those feelings of inferiority or worry about, am I asking the right things? Am I doing the right things? Is it okay for me to be here? Understand that that's your right. If we packed as much of the audacity as other people pack, then how we handle things will be a lot different. So we have to get to a place as a Black community where we are more comfortable with that spirit of authority. If we if we need any help with it, this new generation can teach us. Because these young black kids don't play that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right. Like they don't play that. Home don't play that.
That confidence, right? To that
Yes, but that's
entitlement,
what
that
we
right
need. Like the song from Common and John Legend, the wisdom of the elders and the young people's energy. We need that to come together now, because we see, you know, as much as Black Lives Matter was not a movement that was Black, but we saw the young people's energy. So instead of bashing the movement, where were the elders with the plans for when they got off the streets and say, hey, this is what's next? Like, where's your plan? Like, you literally had the momentum because they had captivated everyone. So the young people were doing their parts, but so many people were bashing them because Black Lives Matter is not a movement and we don't support it. But if you had taken that, the people giving us the knowledge, John Legend and Common said it, glory, when the glory comes, like it'll be all, like literally the wisdom of the elders and the young people's energy. The young people were out there gung-ho, but they did not have a plan for what happens when they leave the streets. They were protesting, but they didn't have policy. That's where your policymakers will come in, instead of bashing and say, well, I don't support Black Lives Matter. Me either. But at the end of the day, my mantra was, I'm a Black woman, so my Black life matters. I don't care what's going on, but they were so invested in researching. Well, what is it doing? Where's the money going? This, that. I don't care what the people doing. If you don't want them to have your money, don't give it to them. But at least give these young people who's out there a policy, so that we can continue and we could have. So I'm not even blaming anyone anymore for where we are as a people. I'm blaming us now. I'm looking at us. Stop, bashing each other and say, hey, you know what? They got people out there that's doing work. And instead of hating on someone, let's really pull together and figure out what it is that we can be doing so that we can move our own narrative forward. I always said, when COVID hit and they didn't want to do right by our children, let's bankrupt the system. Your child has a dollar amount attached to them. Pull them out. And when the numbers go down, but we're so concerned with what's going to happen with the funding. Girl, I don't care. Homeschool your child and then create a pod. And then, hey, I teach English well. You can garden. You can teach gardening. You can do math. But we're not so, our ancestors got so much and moved so much progress forward because they were so ingenious. They were creative. They used the skills. We're so set on having things handed to us and people telling us when to move forward and how to move forward, that we literally sit there, and Nikki's a disruptor. So I can't partner with her. I can't be seen with her because now she's going to disrupt my lifestyle. She disrupt what I've called success. But how is that success when we literally are in the 99% that don't have any wealth? So if you're looking at that one, at yourself and saying, hey, you know what? I'm successful. But you have to move out of your community to go be successful. I can walk out of my door, and I'm just being honest. I chose this, and I don't have to worry about, if I put a Black Lives Matter sign, is somebody going to come put a burning cross? No, because I live in an upper middle class Black neighborhood. So if my son goes jogging, my neighbors are going to call. Like, I wanted to create that village again. Hey, little Greg's out. Okay. But I don't have to worry about, and God bless his soul, an Ahmaud Arbery situation happening because I don't live in a white community. Sometimes we just got to be more intentional about what success looks like. And success didn't look like for me going somewhere where I had no voice. If I'm going to a community meeting now, I just got to sit down and be quiet because no one's talking about the issues that are important to me. No, if I have community, I'm gonna put out, whatever. So it's just so many different things we can talk about, but it's time out for us to point the finger at what somebody else is not doing. And we have opportunities. And like I said, those young people's energy with so many protests and so many movements, and we didn't support and we dropped the ball because, I'm not giving you my policy because it's mine. Like, it's just like, we got to come together.
When I say I've had that conversation a million times, like, I'm vibing off you totally tonight, honey. All I can do is shake my head, preach, facts, speak, elevate. I mean, we are so aligned on that. I continue to share with people that our young folks have a desire to lead. They are not tolerating foolishness. They are not tolerating mistreatment. They are speaking up. They're advocating. They need our support, and they need us to give them the training they need on how to make things happen. And if we
Yeah.
don't step up and do our part, we are the ones who actually create the risk of returning back to the same thing. And that's not fair to the new generation. That's not fair to us. That's not fair to our children who haven't grown up yet. I
Correct.
absolutely agree with you. We have to do a better job of supporting. I
Correct.
have one more question. It's been 1 minute and 23 minutes at this 1 hour 23 minutes, and I know that. Look, this happens every time. When I tell people initially we have up to an hour and a half, people say an hour and a half. I say, honey, let me tell you something. When we start talking, that hour and a half flies by, people didn't even know, and then people are like, well, it's been an hour and a half already. It goes just like quickly. We try to get down to the
Yes.
business. So I have a question. The next question I want to ask. I just want to ask you two more, and then we'll try to move forward. Number one,
Okay.
homeschool or public school? Which do you
Homeschool.
prefer and why?
Homeschool. Freedom. Just so many different things. I no longer have the panic attacks from my son. I no longer have the um, just the reluctancy. He loves it, and we're able to teach things that he wants to do, not necessarily what's mandated by the public school system for each grade level. We can mix the curriculum, we can teach different standards, we can teach things that's not in the standards, but that he would need to know. So homeschool definitely for me and my family because it works for us. You're muted, I think.
Share with
Oh,
us some information about your book as well as your company so that people know how to check your workout and how to
okay.
learn from you and even how to support you because black business is a part of black success. So what you give to us is meaningful and we want to ensure that we also promote what you do.
Okay. Well, my book is called How to Win as a Principal, and it basically provides a 9 step process called diversity. And diversity, each letter of the acronym basically gives a step that the public school principals or parents can use to improve the public school system. And the reason why I chose How to Win as a principal is because so many principals think that they're winning if they get the model schools banner or if they get the school the school performance score. But the truth of the matter is, until those children in that school system win, then you aren't winning. And so it talks about the centerpiece is culture. And so it talks about relationships and data driven and different things. But if the parents have the plan, then you can hold your child's principal accountable for ensuring that your child succeeds. My company is called I Prevail K through 12 Academic Learning Center and I Prevail K through 12 Educational Consulting. As an educational consultant, I work with principals and parents. But right now, my focus is on parents because of how much COVID has exposed the needs of creating better curriculums and better outcomes for students. And so when I work with parents, the first thing we want to know is how can our students even on grade level? Most parents see that 4.0 and they say, hey, my child's doing well. Well, let's test and see if they're on grade level. And so we provide a diagnostic test. And for that, after that, we give them knowledge in reading and writing, since those are my strong suits. And it ties into science and social studies, math. I'm not touching it with a 50-foot pole. So I don't
I'm
do
glad.
like tutoring. I don't do tutoring. Most people ask, why don't you do full tutoring? Because math is not my forte. But if you wanted some extra practice in reading and writing, we look at it. Once we get that diagnostic test, we see which grade level your child is on and where we're going to start closing up those deficits. And like I said, in the public school system, that was something that I had gotten a lot of experience in. But now, even working with my son, once I realized that we closed up his gaps in a few months, and then we were able to create lessons that streamline where we wanted him to be. And so we still use the public school system. So I'm familiar with the standards and familiar with a lot of the texts and different teachings that the public school system is using. But we also incorporated what he likes and what he wants to do into the curriculum. And so that's what I help parents do. Figure out what is it that you desire and dream for your child. Because a lot of parents say, I want my child to do better than I ever did. But they're not wanting to share what they did or what they didn't do to stay where they are now, and they have no idea how to get their child to what success looks like. And so that's what we look at. over time in a course and a program. And we sit there and we plan that. What is your child? What does success look like for your child? And then we give you the steps that I've used to help me create a plan for my son. And then I give you those steps. And so if you want to check anything out, you can go to www.nikkicpatterson.com, or you can send me an email at info@nikkicpatterson.com. And the book is on Amazon, or you can get a copy direct from me. It's called How to Win as a Principal. And it basically gives you a 9-step process for how do you create culturally responsive school systems with a school improvement plan.
I absolutely love it. Some things that she said, definitely, those of you who have been considering homeschooling and you still play with that concept of idea, she's the person to call. Those of you who are saying my child is behind, enrichment is what I need. I can't pull them out for homeschool, but I need to know how to move my child forward. She's the person to call. For schools that want to talk about accountability on both sides of the line, with teachers, with students, even with you in community, she's the person to call. And the thing that I've enjoyed so much about Nikki is that her voice is not just saying, I'm using this for my household or I did it in my classroom. Even outside the classroom, she's continuing to be an advocate and working with our state to help move kids forward and being very bold and confident in who she is. And I want to commend you and thank you for that. And I mean it from a very personal place. And I'm going to explain why. You know, embracing your heritage and your culture very loudly and vocally is often very difficult. And living in a southern state, it can be challenging. And being in your own community, having people at times look like, why is she so radical? Why is she so outspoken? Why would you go and put yourself in such a predicament? Because it's going to be looked at a certain way. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
imperative that those of us who are fearless in standing up for what is right and ensuring that our story is heard and told must continue to stand together so that we can uplift and support each other, um, especially when we know the challenges of look. There's a quote that I heard not too long ago that says sometimes the people you're working for will be the same people who want you silenced, and so that can be make you it can be very challenging, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be in that atmosphere where you're doing the work but not always supported by the people that you care about so passionately. So I want to send you encouragement, send you love, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for being that voice and going all the way to the state level. There's a poem I wrote
Thank
called
you.
Muzzle Over Mike, which is about ensuring that Black voices are heard and how much work needs to be done in Louisiana. Before you log out tonight, I'm going to share that piece. I stopped sharing the poetry at the end of each segment. Our conversations would go so long. And then I was just kind of like, how do people feel about it? Since I've stopped doing the poetry, people are always like, you didn't share a poem at the end. So I'm going to bring that practice back with sharing the pieces. And I've shared Muzzle Over Mike before, but I feel it is perfectly
Mhm.
fitting tonight as we talk about culturalism, the mission within our state, as we talk about Black homeschooling and women and men of color working in education and wanting to move forward the stories of all people, all BIPOC people. So I'm going to share Muzzle Over Mike, and then I will give Miss Nikki a minute to just give any final words before we close out. So here we go with the words to Muzzle Over Mike. We brag good food, good people, and an experience there is none like. Love and hospitality in the sportsman's paradise. Then why does my state give me a muzzle instead of a mic? We're home to the international rap anthem. We will two-step into the late hours of the night. The irony of
Mhm.
loving Aaron Neville and Keith Frank, but still giving so many a muzzle over a mic. You're Louisiana loud and NOLA proud. Football is a way of life. But how can you celebrate the Saints and say I deserve a muzzle over a mic? We are a state still struggling with literacy. Maybe it's because we read stories so full of lies. The truth is always easier to comprehend, but my truth is muzzled when it should be might. The world must know that Black history is American history, yet Louisiana has no sympathy for this plight. 1/3 of our population is Black. This is why I denounce my muzzle and reclaim my mic. Louisiana has had one of the richest import coasts. Sell and sold my people right into strife. If the shackles are no longer, Why am I still bound by a
All right.
muzzle and not free by a mic? My grandparents worked in the fields. They lived in fear of dark Louisiana nights. They could seldom speak for themselves. They had a muzzle, but I want the mic. You say, get over it. Move forward into the new light. If progress is what you want, then let me trade my muzzle for a mic. You can romanticize these plantation homes, call the Civil War a white man's greatest fight, but I will dismantle every falsehood. I don't need permission to drop my muzzle for a mic. On which side of history do you wish to stand? That of oppression, racism, and anti women's rights? A prison pipeline longer than the oil pipeline. I'm taking off my muzzle when I brought my own mic. This state wants representation without negotiation. For those who have suffered, you have no contrites. You want me as a silent partner, but I want to trade my muzzle for a mic. Watching black men beg you to care causes me anguish I struggle with at night. Is this the cost of our voting rights? You can remove our muzzle only to turn off our mics. I am a black mother, a beautiful brown boy with a future so bright. I don't want our present to be his future. Therefore, my muzzle must become his mic. I want to thank Miss Nikki so much. And at this time, I'm going to allow her to add any closing words of advice or direction for us.
Wow, what a beautiful poem. I still have it on my page that I shared once you shared it to your page. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. That is a beautiful and very powerful poem.
Thank
For the parents that are here, honestly, I say advocate for your child. An advocate is one who just basically knows what you want and then you stop at nothing to get it. I don't care who tells you that you should not be doing something and that you should not be somewhere. If you feel that it is necessary for your child to succeed and go beyond what some limitation has been set for them, then do it by all means. So my call, my challenge is to get outside of the box. I think I heard something recently, and they were quoting, and they said, haters are just crabs that pull out the crabs back down into the barrel. And I want to say that it was Jay-Z who said, "Why are we even in a barrel?" That was powerful. Sometimes we accept conditions because we don't know anything else. I pray that the words that I've shared, the journey, the testimony, the experiences have given you hope that there are other ways and there are people out there who are doing things that they didn't know how to do. I didn't know how to do half of the things, any of the things when I first started. But now that I'm watching the success of my son and seeing his strengths and seeing him grow to new heights, heights that would have never been given to him by the public school system, I'm grateful. So I challenge each and every one of you to look at your child and realize that God gave them to you to train up in a manner in which they should go. And when they're older, they shall not depart from them. Make sure it's trainings that you want them to have and not trainings that they have to get because they're not in your care. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for sharing. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to find me on social media, Nikki C. Patterson, or you can send me an email, info at Nikki C. Patterson. Visit my website, www.nikkicpatterson.com, or support me, How to Win as a Principal, on Amazon, or you can send me an email and I'll get you a copy. Thank you all so much.
There's a link for her website, her book, and her Facebook page have all been placed in the comments. I want to also invite all of our teachers to join in to the Teacher Talk one-on-one session this Thursday, where we will talk about prayer, positivity, and positioning during turbulent times in the educational setting. The flyer for that is on my page, as well as the information to join us via Zoom, as well as call in. We do ask that only teachers join in for this night, as we will be doing some healing, talking, and emotional support. And we want to ensure that teachers feel very welcome, safe, and in a place where they can talk about their needs and be given full support. We thank you so much for joining us tonight, and have a fantastic day.
Bye.